So we went from a 36 core machine, which is almost $6,000 a month. And with these tweaks that we're talking about, we're able to get it down to a 4-core machine, which is $1,000 a month.
The month of November was around 30 million page views. Like you said, there's times where out of nowhere we get 2 million pages in a day. A lot of issues were happening. I don't even know if we had the right size servers that were loaded up.
The version control and the ability to run deployments easily and manage assets easily was definitely needed.
At that point, you're making full use of the CDN. You're getting access to the 100 plus edge locations Amazon CloudFront provides.
Now, as you mentioned, we had the time and the opportunity to rebuild the platform into something that's loading, I think, almost 6 times faster or so.
And it performs really well. It performs better than if you were to try to do this image optimization in PHP. It shows you the benefits of caching really clearly.
It is running at lightning speed now. That's kind of like a guilty pleasure for me, is to see how fast we can load a site because the faster it is, the better the audience reacts to it.
Okay, all right, we'll get started now. Thank you for everyone who's tuning in. This is the first of its kind. I'm very excited. This is our first video case study we're doing with a client of ours that's Obsev and a partner of ours as well, Devrix. We also have our director of hosting ops on the line. So we'll do a quick round of intros here in a second, but I just wanted to kind of tee this up and explain what we're doing here. So this is our first attempt to really get behind the scenes and unveil some of the complex technical challenges that we solve for clients in conjunction with our partners. And so, a lot of times when we're talking to PageLead prospects, we can say, we're unlike other hosts in that we can do very sophisticated things and really drill into coding issues and DevOps server issues and such. But this is really, we want to walk the walk here and really actually expose some of that. And Obsev has graciously agreed to be the guinea pig here and kind of help talk through some of this. So thank you, Raymond, for joining. Maybe you can introduce yourself first.
Thanks for having me. I'm Raymond Atipa. I'm the CEO of Obsev Studios. We run Obsev.com, and along with a new site we are just about to launch, whatsthat.com.
Awesome. Cool.
And
Mario.
YouTube channels. That's the other side of the business.
Nice. Well, you guys are doing a lot of traffic, so I can't wait to dig into some of that.
Definitely.
And Mario is a partner of ours. Mario, can you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, Mario Peshev, CEO of Devrix. We do provide some excellence on the WordPress end for publishers, for startups, and some enterprises as well. We are super happy to be working with Ray on both Obsev and What's That, and looking forward to growing the traffic immensely. Probably at some point of time, maybe hitting 1 billion. What would you say, Ray?
Definitely. We got to set the goals high.
There you go.
Awesome. And from our side, we also have our director of hosting ops, Armand. Armand, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Armand Zakarian. I'm the director of hosting operations at PageLead. I head up the DevOps team, and I'm pretty much involved in a lot of the day-to-day stuff. When we have new clients like Obsev coming on, we generally have to pay close attention to what their trouble points are with their current solution they're moving from. And so my role is really getting everybody on the same page, tapping the resources on the DevOps team to do the server tuning and enabling various features, doing kind of that heavy lifting stuff, as well as working with support on making sure that the client, that they know how the client needs to be treated. Any special things that we've done for them, we make sure that it's all documented on our side. And so that the whole team is able to help them instead of having to go to, a DevOps person or to me every time. So it's really just about getting everybody on the same page, getting everything that we've done customized for them in a manageable way, using Ansible, using our Aries Gateway custom rules engine. So yeah, it's really happy to be finally meeting you, Raymond.
Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, all the relationships.
Somewhat in person.
Yeah, it's all been over tickets for everyone watching. So this is actually our first time with a face-to-face, which is interesting. Cool. Well, so the teaser here, before we drill into, I think what I'd like to do is step through the series of challenges, and we can kind of drill in on each one. But the teaser is, or I guess the crux of the main challenge was, you guys have a new site. You're doing a substantial amount of traffic, and it's prone to viral spikes. You guys, the nature of your traffic is such that you get like Snapchat and these other, social media channels that drive massive amounts of spiky traffic. And so that type of setup really needs to have a good caching system enabled. And so we found that due to a coding a thing that we discovered, we were able to get you from a server that needed to be, it was one of our larger enterprise servers. I think it was like a $6,000 a month spend up during one of those massive spikes. But with some fancy footwork and some tweaking of the code, we were able to get that down to $1,000 a month server, right? So that's like a sixth of the cost through making that change. So that's the teaser. We'll hit that one last. There was a series of challenges leading up to that. So I figured let's start with when we set you guys up, just kind of chronologically walk through these. So you guys started with us, I believe, in November, a couple months back. And I guess, Mario, this would be a question for you. I know the first thing we did was to set up a Git-based, a source control workflow for them. What was the need that prompted that? Why do you like to use Git? Why source control and why Git and why that deploy bot setup?
Yeah, so the previous version of the website that was set by the previous agency wasn't quite ideal. It was based on Assembler, and it wasn't really quite intuitive. When it comes to deployments, working with different teams was challenging. Working with multiple people on multiple branches was really something that wasn't that well established. So in order to solve that and in order to move things to the next level, essentially we moved entirely to Git. We separated all concerns, the database, the code base, everything kind of moving into different pieces. Assets were already moving into a separate direction, and I believe that Arman is going to share some of the challenges with assets a little bit later. So doing that, we chose a path that was more resilient, that was more flexible and easier to maintain over time. Which is why, of course, we recommended you guys, since we are also hosting other publishers, some serving hundreds of millions of page views a month, and we know that you can scale and we know that you can deliver. And due to the nature of the complex nature of Ray's business, having kind of right now having Obsev, now we're working on a separate multi-site with kind of different branches. We really needed an infrastructure that can host all of that and be able to create and spin up different staging environments, even for multi-site, and map domains together whenever we need it, and even move some of the sites and port them to the multi-site in order to make all that work. So version control and the ability to run deployments easily and manage assets easily was definitely needed, and we simply knew that you can deliver.
Awesome. And Arman, from our side, what was involved in that? Was that a pretty straightforward process, or was this a unique configuration that we've not seen before? Or can you talk about, how this was in terms of,
Yeah, so we make it pretty easy. If you're using something like DeployBot, then you need SSH access. So we have our Atomic control panel, which supports collaborators. You can just invite an email address to your account. You say what role they should have, and then you upload an SSH key. Once you upload your public key there, then you tie that in on the other end on DeployBot, and off you go. Like, you don't have to talk to support to set up your SSH keys. That's all automated on our side. We generally try to do that with things that are very common. Our support team's always there. They're always helpful. They can catch things if something is not working right or something's not automated yet. But we always try to delegate that to be self-service so that you don't have to wait for a response at all. It just happens. On the topic of Git, there's actually maybe 5 or 6 different ways you can use Git on Pagely. We support the most basic way, obviously, which is just making a Git repository on your VPS, which lets you set up post-receive hooks. You can run build scripts from there. You can deploy that once it's successful to your live site. We support webhooks with any generic system, but mainly GitHub and Bitbucket is what our customers use. That acts as a notification system that can initiate a script to go pull your data from GitHub or from Bitbucket or wherever. What that basically means is once you take an action on GitHub, you merge a branch or you tag a release, that is what invokes that whole process to begin. It's not running git push on your computer to the server on Pagely. And then we also support deep web routes. So if you want to have a current symlink to what your release should be, and then you can use that as a way to build a release and then have an easy way to roll back to previous code base, we support that too. That's just a few examples of the flexibility that we have on Pagely.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, so that was really like the first milestone, I feel like, in looking through. And just to let everyone know, I went through and actually looked at the 30 open tickets that, the 30 all-time existing tickets, read every exchange, and I'm really trying to extract out what I think were kind of the key challenges and milestones here. So that seemed like the first one, and that's great. Let's talk about the second thing. And actually, Raymond, are you willing to share what your traffic was in November when this all started, or are we?
Sure. Let me.
I think I know that.
The thing is, it's a little tricky to give you a very accurate number because the way we were buying audience from Snapchat was completely throwing GA off. It was counting page views as sessions. So then that kind of throws it all off. But I can give you a rough estimate. So month of November was around 30 million page views.
I mean, that's a substantial amount of traffic. So doing a good amount of traffic, you guys have a pretty neat site, the way it does like the infinite scroll, and it's the news site for people listening. You can go to obsev.com, it's obsev.com, and see what we're talking about here. It seemed like the next challenge in looking through the tickets on early December, there's an issue with the infinite scroll that I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about. And it seemed like due to the way that worked, it was kind of consuming unnecessary server bandwidth. And so maybe Armand or Mario, if one of you guys want to kind of briefly state what that issue was.
Sure. Oh, did you want to go?
No, I was just going to discuss the business semantics for a moment, and then you can explain kind of the technical implementation. So basically from our standpoint, simply because we are delivering traffic for all sorts of different social networks and kind of different traffic resellers, so to speak, we do deliver different layouts depending on whether we are serving traffic to, say, Facebook or Outbrain or Snapchat or whoever it is. And in order to accommodate that, and in order to make sure that we serve the proper amount of data and the most optimal layout, we have different templates on the WordPress end. So we hide some mods, we have some stickies, we have some videos here and there. It's fairly dynamic. And in order to do that, we are using UTM parameters, simply because throughout UTM parameters, we can define whether someone's coming again from Facebook or Snapchat or somewhere else. And normally, in order to handle that, we do want to maximize the potential of caching in order to save server resource and in order to reduce the server cost. And we had to work closely with Armand on actually finding the most optimal manner to serve different layouts whenever needed and still retain the vast majority of the cache so that we can bring the cost down from 6,000 to 1,000, which Sean already mentioned. So Armand, do you want to tell a bit more about the technical semantics of this one?
Well, actually, let me just quick clarify for the people listening, if they're not familiar with what a UTM parameter is. This is something in the query string that you identify. It's different for every channel, inbound channel that you have to the site. And so it's a way of identifying where this traffic came from. And you guys are actually serving up a different layout to those channels based on where they came from. Correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you just go and put together your own hosting stack. Let's say you pick up Easy Engine and you get your WordPress environment up and running, and you put some Nginx on it, and now you got caching. The URL that you view the site through is your cache key. And so while the UTM parameters let you do stuff like what Mario described to be able to serve optimized pages depending on where the traffic is coming from, it's really detrimental to caching. By default, it'll consider every single one of those pages as unique, when really you might just need a couple of things to be a differentiating factor, like the UTM source or the term or whatever. So on Pagely, by default, we strip out those UTM parameters from the cache key. But if you need to whitelist any specific values, and it doesn't just have to be all or nothing, we can do specific UTM source or UTM term or a combination of all those. And so that's baked into our gateway. So it's really easy for us to adjust it. We don't have to do any crazy stuff. Even if you're on a entry-level plan, even if you're on our new 199 vVerse 1, you can do that kind of stuff. Keeping in mind, obviously there's performance impacts to that, but you get that same feature set across the whole line. So, for Raymond, he doesn't have to really be concerned of like, oh, if I'm in a slow season, this is not when I'm getting all my traffic. I want to scale down my plan to a lower plan that can handle the lower traffic. I don't have to worry about losing these features that Page has set up for me. Like, those features are available across the whole product line for VPS. So about the CDN stuff, the way our Press CDN feature works is with the WordPress plugin that will rewrite the URLs for your static assets to go through an Amazon CloudFront distribution that we configure for you. And the URL gets rewritten automatically for any asset on that initial page load. We just do that for you. You don't really have to do anything unless you're doing some additional assets loading through like Ajax Load More or Infinite Scroll. And I think that's what we want to cover in this part of the talk, is the challenge that presented and how Devrix was able to figure it out and get that working properly. And really, it's just a matter of getting the right URL, the right domain name to be used when you're loading more assets. And then at that point, you're making full use of the CDN. You're getting access to the 100+ edge locations Amazon CloudFront provides. And it performs a lot better for those static assets to load somewhere closer to where the visitor is coming from, rather than having to go all the way to the origin server, which, if they're on the East Coast and if your server's in Virginia, it's going to be fine. If they're coming from the West Coast, it might be a little choppier. If they're in Europe, it could be even slower. So it's really important to get the CDN to load as many assets as possible so that you can get the best performance.
Nice. And so initially the CDN was not working properly just because of the way the infinite scroll worked, or at least that was my take on it. And so what was the resolution there to making that work properly?
It was just being aware of the way that the Pagely platform works, and really how, unless you're doing full site acceleration where you have your entire website behind a CDN, you have to do this kind of stuff where you have a slightly different URL for your images, which is like cdn.obsev.com. And it's really just being aware of that factor and making the necessary adjustments to the site code, changing some stuff in the theme so that it'll put the CDN URL instead of the main site URL. So just to be clear, out of the box, you get those rewrites. It's only if you're doing any special stuff to make that you have to actually make a few adjustments. But at render time, when we're actually rendering the HTML before we send it back to the visitor, we already do that on the initial load. And we are looking into ways to make that just work, regardless of if you're using Infinite Scroll or not. So that we definitely understand that's an issue that some people run into, and we'll work with Devrix, figure out what their solution was, and see what we can bake right into our Press CDN product to make that less of a headache in the future.
I'd also love to add that a lot of the challenges we faced during this migration was not from Devrix's code base at all. It was from a previous developer who had built this. And we moved to Pagely to be able to pretty much work a little bit easier with Devrix number one. It was their suggestion. However, we saw everything that we were able to be offered from Pagely as far as optimizing and using less hardware to get to where we needed to. And you guys will see as Mario and his team are building out the a new site, which we'll be transferring all the content over into. It is running at lightning speed now, because a lot of this stuff that you see live. So Obsev itself was comprised of over 12 years of content. It was about a handful of sites that merged into one, and it was called Obsev. And we faced a lot of challenges, with over 200,000 images that needed to be, imported into the new, Press CDN or so? Not Press CDN, the image caching. Yeah, the image caching. Yeah, that was the one, that was a challenge because things were starting to break. But a lot of the current site you see has a lot of Band-Aids on it. And that's why we've faced these issues. But I'm pretty certain that when that complete new build that we'll be launching shortly, we won't have any of these issues anymore.
Yeah, appreciate you pointing this out, Ray. Basically, one of the most common challenges we do face whenever we're kind of starting out in a high traffic website like yours, essentially is, as you said, lots of Band-Aids being plugged here and there for various reasons. Different heavy plugins just interfering with the life cycle of the application and kind of colliding with the rest of the workload. So essentially what we try to do here is make things, I'm going to say, bearable for a few months, just trying to patch whatever we can, make through Q4 essentially, make the best out of the heaviest traffic of the year in terms of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Christmas, and everything else in between. And having all that in place, now, as you mentioned, we had the time and the opportunity to rebuild the platform into something that's loading, I think, almost 6 times faster or so. And as you pointed out, moving all the content to the new platform, which is entirely designed to handle high traffic publishing websites.
Ray, I was going to ask you, so where were you hosted prior to Pagely?
We had an Amazon AWS account directly.
Okay. So
again, it was, we had a complete different mentality of doing this. We had an origin URL, which had a, CloudFront, URL cache onto www.obsev.com. So the barrier there, was constantly facing issues of what's being cached and being shown to the user, and things that were cached, such as, JavaScript files, and they weren't being cleared, correctly, and it was causing a lot of issues on the front end. A lot of issues that were happening. I don't even know if we had the right size servers that were loaded up. It was just not done in an optimal way to actually be able to scale comfortably. And yes, when we would have large scales of traffic, a large uptick in traffic come in, things would start breaking. And, and like you said, there's times where out of nowhere we get 2 million pages in a day, and that's because, we get a campaign that just lights on fire. And you need to be prepared for those, without somehow, you need to be prepared with, you need to be prepared for that programmatically more so than manually.
Right. And so you mentioned that the site now loads lightning fast, and obviously from a visitor perspective, that just translates to a better experience, and they're
Yeah,
gonna
we end up seeing higher paging per session. Which technically, in our business model, we end up loading more ads to the user. We don't upset the user with lag time, and as fast as the site is now, the newer site will be much faster. We've already seen that with the infrastructure that Mario's team has built for the What's That site, and this is going into that same multi-site platform.
So can you maybe, or if you're willing to, can you quantify or give any kind of indication, like business-wise, what that translates to in terms of like repeat business or time on site or any of those key metrics that are important to you?
Yeah, when we're trying to tell a story to a user with a certain article piece that has 40 elements to it, you don't want that user to tune out for any particular reason. Again, content is number one. It is hooking them in with the right content. When you hook that person in with the right content, then the site itself needs to be performing optimally. When you send 100,000 people to one piece of content, that's within an hour or so, the server takes a beating to it. Especially with these, we have content pieces that have 40 images in there. They add 40 images, you layer on all the JavaScript that we're loading, with all the ads that are loading, so on and so forth. It becomes a heavy strain on the server. So every millisecond, every millisecond the site is performing, you have a better chance of that user going deeper into the article and finding the actual hook that they're looking for. So the faster the site loads, we see an automatic return on pretty much the retention rate of a user. So Mario's team built out a quiz platform for us, and we marketed a quiz we did, a nostalgia quiz. The quiz itself reacts in extremely fast time, as far as by the time you answer the question to the time you go to the next question. We saw an 87% retention rate on that, which means 87% of the users actually got to the end of the quiz.
That's amazing.
Again, so it's part content, part technology. They both have to kind of work together. If we have poor technology, for example, and the user is lagging 4 or 5 seconds between a question and an answer, chances are that user is going to drop off 40%. Once they're about 40% through to the quiz, rather than 100% or 87%.
Right. You got to have both those elements there. Like, you've got to have compelling content, but you can't be handicapped by your technology, basically.
Exactly. And the faster the site is loading, the higher it's exponentially higher how much more content that user will be consuming.
That's great. Well, so let's talk. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, Sean. Just to add on top of what Ray said, we also need to account for the fact that media users are, for the most part, oftentimes 80–90% of the users are using mobile, and they're also using social media. And by social media, I mean that they're actually using mobile applications like Facebook's in-app browser, Snapchat's in-app browser, which are extremely heavy applications. And whenever you have longer stories, because storytelling is extremely important, and Obsev stories are incredible and extremely engaging, it's a pity whenever a mid-tier device with a heavy, say, Snapchat browser on a mobile device with 6 or 7 different types of messengers is simply crashing 5, 6, 7 headlines into the article itself. So being able to provide faster response times and less delays both on the client side and the server side, it's simply paramount in order to get people through the entire journey.
Cool. Well, so I want to talk about a different facet of how speeding things up worked. So CDN was one way that we were able to make that happen. But let's also talk about the press thumb thing with the image optimization. So my understanding was there was some issues. You had this massive number of images that were brought over into S3, but they weren't necessarily optimized for fast loading. And so, Armand, maybe you can tackle this one. Just talk a little bit about what Press Thumb is and what we did there.
Sure. So Press Thumb is Pagely's automatic image optimization and thumbnail generation feature. You can get it for free on any VPS plan. The way it works is using a underlying application called Thumber, which is written in Python, and combined with some custom gateway rules and an MU plugin for WordPress, we rewrite the URLs to your static assets to be like .jpeg, .optimal, .jpeg, or .jpeg.webp if you're on Chrome. And when you request an image from that URL, it serves the most optimized image you can get without having to sacrifice quality. And there's a lot of different plugins out there that do this. There's Kraken, there's Smushit, there's all these services. Some of them are cloud-backed, and then many of those require you to do all that image processing up front. The big difference with Press Thumb is that we do that processing when you request that image on the fly. And if you request an image by a different dimension, we can do dynamic thumbnails as well. And so what that does, it saves you from having to spend so much disk space having to generate all those different dimensions that you need up front. And it saves you from the server load up front of having to go and create those optimized versions of those images as well. So we just do that all on the fly as it's requested. And once it's hit once, it caches just like any other normal image. It goes to the CDN for the global distribution, and it overall helps you save on your bandwidth costs and your storage costs. Obviously, it's a dynamic service that runs on the server, so that takes a little bit of resources. But we have some very large clients, and Obsev is one of those like high traffic sites that are using this, like leveraging it a lot, and it performs really well. It performs better than if you were to try to do this image optimization in PHP, and it keeps your PHP workers free to handle other stuff, actual WordPress related. Not trying and it was not using this. It was actually using PHP functions that we disable on Pagely for security reasons. So it actually would not even work in our hardened environment. And so that was actually the first thing that we looked at when we were onboarding, before even the migration could be finalized, before we could even switch over the site to be hosted here. We helped to get that, kind of get that thing out of the picture and get Press Thumb in place. And the end result is, instead of doing this kind of crazy way of doing it with some plugin that's not really supported anymore, or made by some guy you don't do business with anymore, it's a very simple, straightforward plugin that we install that just rewrites the URLs, and the heavy lifting is being done by Nginx and Aries and by Thumber. And so that overall helps with your website's performance, because your website is, your PHP workers are serving the website instead of trying to do all this work on images.
Cool. And was there anything else? I think I read at some point that there was some code that was calling larger than necessary images sizes that were like getting auto constrained down by the theme. Was that another thing? Maybe you can mention that. Yeah,
so that's one of the big things that Press Thumb helped with, because you don't have to generate all the images that you need up front for the different sizes. You can just append the dimension that you want to the original image URL. So if it's like, obsev.com/, image.jpg and you want a 150 by 150 version of that, you just call it image-150.150.jpg. You don't call image.jpg and then change the size of it in your HTML code to fit that little part of the site. You can just call it by the size you want, and the server will render that image by that size. So you can fit it into that space without having to scale it down. And so that helps.
The less brittle. It sounds like it's a less brittle approach to.
Yeah, that helps a lot with client side because you don't have to have the client download a large image, and it also helps just for browser performance because it's not scaling down a large image to fit inside that window. It's just putting the image at the native size that it got from the server.
Cool. All right. So moving on, I'm looking at the next challenge here. So media was previously served from S3 but required that WP plugin. Is this related, or is this actually like cutting down on the PHP worker thing? Is that a separate challenge, or is that part of what you're just talking about?
So they're two different things. So if you just keep all your images on your server, then you have to keep resizing your disk on your server as you grow, right? Because you don't want to allocate a terabyte of space off the bat because you're going to be paying for space you're not using, and then you have to monitor that and keep resizing it. So this is where Press 3 adds value, because we have a system where it will automatically shuffle older images onto S3, and combined with custom gateway rules, we have it so that it can proxy that asset from S3 with the same URL that you normally would have for your image if it's on disk. And S3, obviously, there's really no limit to how big your S3 bucket can be. You can just keep putting stuff in there, and you don't have to worry about resizing the disk. It's obviously a lot cheaper to put stuff on S3 than on EBS volumes. So it's just a lot easier for a site that's growing fast, adding a lot of new content, a lot of large images. They don't really have to worry about having to purchase more disk space all the time. And actually, with Press 3, we just have Ray have an S3 bucket on his own Amazon account. We don't mark up that price at all. It's just bring your own bucket, and you pay Amazon at cost for that storage, versus what we charge is 10 gigabytes is $15 a month, because it's on EBS, and we add redundancy and we back it up and all this stuff. So the Press 3 and the Press Thumb together is a really big win, because you get your images optimized automatically. You get dynamic thumbnails, so you don't have to have as much upfront space being used to make all those thumbnails. And then as those images age, they get shuffled over to S3, and that keeps your server costs low. And just the Pagely magic part of it is, regardless of where that file lives, it's all accessible over the same URL. So you don't have to do any fancy stuff to decide like, oh, well, this image is on S3, so let me render this URL. This one's local, let me render that URL. Or have to put the images onto S3 right away to work around that problem. So that's
all transparent to the client too, right? Ray, your workflow didn't change. This stuff was basically all transparent to you.
Yep.
Yeah, so Ray just uploads his assets, his media into the library. There's nothing different as far as WordPress is concerned. It just works the same way, same file structure, same everything. And we have an out-of-band system that will handle the uploads and the proxying. WordPress and the PHP workers don't get bogged down trying to do any of that work.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move on to the kind of the last one, and this is the biggest win. So this is the one I'm excited to talk about. But on December 18th, Ray, what happened? You guys had some kind of post that went extremely viral that day, and you were just getting crushed with traffic. from my understanding.
Yeah, that was that was a nice day of traffic. Over 3 or 4 million pages just came in a matter of, I don't know, 5-6 hours or so. And the issue there, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was the UTM parameters not being whitelisted, and that was causing multiple variations in the page to try to get cached, and which was hitting the server extremely hard. So I think temporarily, again, you guys jump in if I'm wrong at any point, but I think we temporarily had to, drive up the size of the server, and then once the UTM parameters that we needed whitelisted were whitelisted, we saw the performance of this, or the CPU usage dropped tremendously once they were whitelisted, instead of constantly trying to cache new pages. So it was the same page trying to get cached a million different ways because of all the IDs that were being passed in. And once the whitelist happened, we saw a decline. We were able to spin down the server within a day or so, back to normal levels again.
And so this is custom cache keys, I believe, Armand. Is that what we did in that scenario?
Yeah, we had to make a few extra adjustments to the UTM whitelisting, and so just to optimize and make sure it was only varying on the parameters that had to be different. Just so you could have the right page to render, or that you could get the right sort of accounting for your affiliate traffic, so you can know where your traffic came from, but also display the right stuff. So this is kind of going back to, like, if you're doing it on your own and you have an out-of-the-box kind of setup, put it together, and then you get a bunch of this traffic that has all those different URLs or different query strings to the end of the URL. That same exact thing is going to happen, unless you have something to optimize that on the gateway level. So, and that load spike that Ray's talking about, that kind of thing happens to our customers every day. It's like a daily thing for us. It's just normal, So we have automation to take your EC2 server from 4 cores up to, I think like 96 cores is the most we can do on a single box. We're really just limited by what Amazon offers. That's what it is really. We're basically like your Amazon pros. So yeah, like, it shows you the benefits of caching really clearly, because you can go down from a 36 core box, if you have good caching, down back to 4 cores or 8 cores, because you don't have all that dynamic workload going to PHP. It's just Nginx caching everything. And the really cool thing, even if you have fast performing code, even if your dynamic PHP is quick and efficient, it's always going to vary a little bit in how well it can perform. Like, sometimes it might be 300 milliseconds, sometimes it might be 600, just because it is a dynamic call. But when you have some caching like Nginx or Varnish in front of it, it's always consistent. You're always going to get the same performance, and it's always going to be orders of magnitude higher than what you can get with the dynamic request. Even on a VPS1, if your content is really caching well, if you're only hitting cache content, you can do 300 requests a second. I mean, that's pretty high. That's more than most people see. Even if you're driving a lot of traffic to your site, it's really hard to hit 300 requests per second. So yeah, it's the big thing is, like, these types of things are not special edge cases for us. Like, we've built our entire system to accommodate customization. Every single customer that's a VPS customer of Pagely has their own instance on EC2. They have their own dedicated resources for CPU and memory. So, just to avoid, like, adding insult to injury, like, hey, your congratulations, the conversation becomes congratulations on your success. You have a lot of traffic, you guys are gaining popularity, and let's help you solve a couple load issues and make sure your site's running faster, rather than if you're on shared hosting, hey, you're the bad neighbor and we have to shut you down. It's a totally different conversation because of the way our product is positioned.
Well, and it's precisely at the time where, you've done the hard work to generate that viral traffic spike. And so it's a shame if at the peak of that, when you're getting the most eyeballs, we're talking about now is when you go down and you're losing out on the most traffic. So it's got to be particularly painful, Ray, I would imagine, to be in that position of like having the unicorn viral spike there, just go crazy. And then all of a sudden we're down.
Absolutely. And I mean, and that's a twofold issue because you're buying audience where they're landing nowhere. So it's an automatic loss right there. And two is, the social media, the social networks and the native networks, they all have their bots that are automatically checking the ads in, pretty much in real time. And once they can't hit the site, that ad is gone. And it took, sometimes 2 weeks to get an ad to go, to get that successful. And 2 weeks of work just goes down the toilet within seconds.
Yeah, so double damage there.
Yeah.
And was that the only thing it took to resolve that, Armand or Mario, maybe one of you? Because I could swear I read in one of the tickets that we had advised whatever code had been written in PHP for manipulating the UTM stuff. I think I read somewhere that we advised moving that to JavaScript and that maybe that played some part.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. Obviously, you can try to pipe those UTM parameters to be parsed by PHP. And if you need that to be handled by PHP on every request, caching is going to get in the way of that. So you can make a couple tweaks where that's read on the JavaScript side, on your client side instead, and it makes a big difference. Obviously, we can let it all bypass cache and go to PHP, but then you're back to needing 36 or 96 or however many cores to handle it. So yeah, I mean that was one of the things that one of our senior DevOps engineers helped with, is advising on how to do this using JavaScript instead of relying on PHP. And I think he even provided some working examples of how to do that, so that the developer could actually go and make that change, to the real code base.
And Mario, I think you guys were the ones that had executed that fix in terms of switching it to JavaScript. Is there anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, so we have initially started with a JavaScript solution, kind of from day one before we moved to Pagely, and we faced tons of different race conditions being implemented on the JavaScript end. And since the entire advertising model revolves around chatting with Google's DFP and rendering ads and invoking header bidding and a bunch of other things that happen behind the scenes, every single race condition, every single script that may be delayed or not loaded on time or anything like that may completely crash the entire user experience. And due to the lack of reliability in the previous platform, we simply couldn't afford to make any guesses, because otherwise with a successful campaign like, let's say, the one in December with millions of page views over the course of several hours, we may as well have otherwise lost, let's say, 30% of the traffic due to slower load times and scripts loading hectically in various order, ads not showing up, and potentially maybe even getting some violations like the one that Ray said. Like your ad may get banned. Google may start knocking on your door and say, hey, you're kind of claiming that you're displaying ads, but those ads aren't showing to users. What are you doing? And it's getting a very complicated case study. And being able to reliably implement the same functionality with JavaScript on your infrastructure and actually trust that functionality is something that helped us immensely to reduce the workload as well.
Awesome. Cool. Well, fellas, so just to recap in terms of quantifying what that represents for the folks listening. So it was a 36 core, Armand, I believe that was what it was running at the N3. So we went from a 36 core machine, which is almost $6,000 a month. And with these tweaks that we're talking about, we're able to get it down to a 4-core machine, which is $1,000 a month. So that's a significant savings. It also means it's more reliable because it is being served from cache, that it's just dramatically more immune to this type of unreliability. So great job. I mean, that's an incredible win. I think we don't need to take it much further than that. This is a good lesson here. Ray, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any parting thoughts, or in terms of your experience with both Devrix and Pagely?
No, I mean, other than, experience has been great so far, and I know Armand spent over a month or so in the whole, for bringing on this site that was so complex and trying to make it, as simple as possible to pretty much onboard into Pagely, and we successfully got it here. Really looking forward to the launch of the multi-site with Devrix, and to see how fast we can load everything. That's kind of like a guilty pleasure for me, is to see how fast we can load a site because the faster it is, the better the audience reacts to it. So looking forward to the new build, and should be out shortly.
Awesome. And Mario, I want to give you just a quick chance for a commercial, because you are one of our trusted, valuable partners. How do the people listening, if they wanted to work with you as a partner, how do they go about contacting you?
Thanks, Sean. It's appreciated. Everyone who would be willing to share the pleasure of being hosted with Pagely can find us at devrix.com. We do help, like I said, both enterprises and publishers serving tens and hundreds of millions of page views. I believe all of the success stories are hosted with you guys. We know that you can do it, and we know that you can, prove it. And essentially, yeah, devrix.com, devrix.com, and happy to chat with you.
Awesome. And Mario is also listed on our partners page. It's just pagely.com/partners. You'll find him there as well.
Yep.
So, cool. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Ray, congrats on your continued growth. We definitely hope to be there when you hit the billion page view mark. So.
Thanks.
The free combo swap.
All right, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.